Well, the Joint Chiefs of Staff here at the President Moon Jae-in's Blue House say that the launch happened at 10:17 this morning. They sent a text message to reporters just 3 minutes later, and a text message to reporters usually indicates that it is a ballistic missile, but we still don't know the type. What the president has done is convened an emergency meeting of his top security advisors. They're going through the details at the moment. But what we're hearing from that meeting, and certainly what analysts are saying at the moment, is it could be a submarine-launched ballistic missile because it happened, it was launched at Shimpo, and that is the site of the DPRK's submarine base, the naval submarine base. The big main one, and it would kind of make sense because South Korea recently tested its own submarine launched ballistic missile. This, of course, is a missile that's very hard to track and very hard to detect before it fires, if not impossible. And South Korea had a very successful launch, making it only the 7th country in the world with proven technology like this. The DPRK has conducted tests on these missiles before, but it's widely believed they were tested from undersea platforms and not from submarines. So, given this comes in the wake of South Korea's test, it could be that the DPRK also wants to prove it has this technology, but it comes as part of a lot of tests this year. This is test number 8. We've seen hypersonic missiles, regular ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, and all part of the 5-year plan, this new 5-year plan that Kim Jong-un talked about recently about radically boosting the nation's defenses, but also coming amid these key talks between the United States, Japan, and South Korea, and analysts saying that's not a coincidence.
Well, Jack, let's talk about that and the timing of this launch here with those talks underway, as you just mentioned here. How will the conversation be impacted by this launch?
It's going to put pressure on the conversation. Now, when the launch happened this morning, I was talking to one of the government advisors on nuclear policy regarding the DPRK, and immediately he said this is probably going to be a short-range missile, so it's enough to rattle people without being seen as a major provocation. And he believed it was to speed up the process towards what is hoped here in Seoul as well to be an inter-Korean summit. This is something that President Moon Jae-in has proposed. There has been a positive reception to this idea in Pyongyang, and it's really just about how do we get there from now. The DPRK has reopened the hotlines. It's been making a lot of positive statements, and at the same time we have these meetings, the intelligence chiefs of Japan, South Korea, and the US meeting here in South Korea, and in the United States, the point people on denuclearization talks, and we've heard some statements there from No Kyu-dok, South Korea's representative, also the US representative, saying they did talk about the potential of an end-of-war agreement, so a formal peace treaty to end the Korean War, which is still technically ongoing, which could build trust, and also humanitarian assistance. So Sung Kim, the US representative, also adding that tougher line that UN sanctions would have to stay in place to bring pressure while all this is happening. So, it's a tough situation. Is it going to be enough to bring Pyongyang to the negotiating table? The analyst I spoke to when that test happened said, yes, it's probably going to happen. And Seoul and Pyongyang would probably like it to happen before President Moon Jae-in leaves office in about 5 months' time. So his prediction, whether right or not, is a potential inter-Korean summit for November.
Heard from the U.S. Special Representative to the DPRK, Sung Kim, earlier in the day. Of course, this was before the latest news of this possible weapons launch off of the Korean peninsula. But what he had to say after that initial meeting with his South Korean counterpart was that from the U.S. perspective, he said, we will seek diplomacy with the DPRK to make tangible progress that increases the security of the United States and our allies. And he went on to stress that the U.S. is looking to meet with the DPRK's leaders again to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, saying that the U.S. wanted to do so without preconditions, but also adding that the allies of the United States need to adhere to the United States Security Council resolutions, which is basically referring to the sanctions, which the DPRK is, of course, very upset about. So that is what has happened in Washington. Now, the next day, we'll have what we expect to be a trilateral meeting, bringing in the Japanese side as well.
So with these diplomatic meetings underway in Washington, let's get the view now from Japan. For more, let's get over live to Terence Terashima joining us from Tokyo. So how is Japan reacting to this missile launch from the DPRK?
Yes, the Japanese media has sent a news flash on the projectile fired from DPRK, and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said DPRK's continued missile launch. They launched for 4 times in September. So Kishida said it is very regrettable, and Japan is undergoing election at the moment, so it is very hard for the Prime Minister to tackle this problem until the election is settled. But it is certainly one of the key agenda that Kishida has once the general election settles at the end of the month. But there is a public concerns that the DPRK's missile technology is advancing fast, and it is undetectable if it's fired from submarine or by train that comes out from the tunnel, etc. So there is a deep concern in Japan that whether Japanese technology, Japanese defense capability can cope with these new missiles as well. So as soon as the election ends, this is one of the top agendas that Prime Minister Kishida promised to tackle.
Yeah, help us understand kind of the public reaction to all this. As you mentioned, an election is going to be happening there in a couple of weeks. Campaigning is underway. So how big of an issue is the DPRK when it comes to voters' minds?
Very much so. Well, I'm afraid that the COVID is the top agenda, but DPRK is one of the major concerns in 2 ways. One is that the technology is advancing, and Japan, South Korea, and U.S. coordination needs to be enhanced, and thus diplomacy with South Korea needs to improve, etc. And Japan is also boosting its defense budget. So there is a concern on the other end that Japan's defense arsenal is expanding, and there's a debate on possible preemptive strike capabilities, etc. So there is a strong public concerns. One is Japan's capability, Japan's coordinations diplomatically, as well as Japan is building up its military capabilities in order to tackle these kind of threats. So there is multiple concerns with this kind of launch from the